Now, Simon, this is personal, this is invasive, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. What have you been watching?
Whew, I'm a little bit shocked with your forthrightness, Dan, but I will try and recover and just get an answer for you. In cinemas this week...
I'd like you're so invested in this, you're like, I'm going to look up onto my dream journal and see what it is I've been thinking about lately.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. There is a film that's hit cinemas at the moment called In a Violent Nature. Now, we're in the middle of a very rich vein of horror movies, no pun intended, at the movies. With Sting, the Spider movie, with Maxine in cinemas, with a whole bunch of really terrific, scary films doing the rounds. In a Violent Nature is something a little bit different. In this film, we are essentially cast in the character of the killer being this hooded slasher, the kind of which you see in films like the Friday the 13th films, or My Bloody Valentine, or all those movies that have an axe wielding or hook wielding slasher at the center of them. But instead of seeing this through the eyes of the victims, where we're usually asked to stand beside the teenagers or the local dumb sheriff as they try to hunt down this killer and eventually getting killed themselves, we spend this movie just walking through the woods with the hooded murderer. I can honestly say about 40% of this film is a steady cam shot from behind the killer. And we hear over there's some voices of the teenagers, and over there a car goes past, which is the sheriff. So you get this idea that there is a movie going on out there about these characters, but the character that we're invested in and the character that we're standing beside and walking with in this film is the actual murderer. It makes for one of the most unique and interesting horror films I've ever seen, because you don't have that tension of who's going to be killed because you don't know about this people. You just have this knowledge that someone is going to be very horribly murdered, and this has some very horrible splattery effects in it. And you're not quite sure what you're looking forward to as a film, because there's very little character development with the monster, with the creature in this, the killer. But you're completely invested with his journey. It's directed by a young Canadian filmmaker called Chris Nash, and it is a movie that I was completely rattled by. And I'm kind of glad I didn't see it on the big screen, because I would have been asking myself exactly who am I siding with in this movie? Whereas sitting at home on the couch, I was able to kind of take a step back and maybe try to come to terms with the feelings I was having. It's called In a Violent Nature. It is a redefinition of the slasher genre, and a really interesting film as well. But be warned, it does have some really shocking killings in it, which are a blast to watch. But yeah, it's a very strange film, In a Violent Nature, which is in cinemas now.
So when I'm looking for film criticism or TV criticism, the one place I always go to is cracked.com. And that's just because madmagazine.com doesn't necessarily have the level of film criticism I'm necessarily looking for. So Cracked is definitely my go-to destination. Anyway, Cracked today have a review for Taika Waititi's Time Bandits TV series, the remake of the Terry Gilliam film from the early 80s.
Yes.
Now, I've never seen the original film. I don't have a strong investment in Time Bandits one way or another, but let me read you the headline for this, and I'd like to see if you think this is maybe fair. Taika Waititi's Time Bandits makes hours feel like days.
That feels a bit bait grabby to me. I don't agree with that.
Look, here's the thing. Have you watched the show at all?
I have seen the first 2 episodes of this, and I should point out I am also a avid fan of the original film, which I saw a couple of times at the movies and countless times on video.
Okay, well, as I said, I've never seen the original film, so I had no real connections to this going in. But I got to say, watching this, I thought I would have loved this movie if I was 10 years old, but I'm not 10 years old, so I really wasn't into it. So I said movie, TV series. This is very much one of these British, and again, I don't know how much this hews to the movie, but it is what it is. This is very much in the line of those sort of British things where there's a child who doesn't fit in with his family, who suddenly gets swept up into like a magical quest. In this one, it's an 11-year-old boy who's really interested in history. His family just keep on making fun of him in a particularly cruel way. There's no love. I guess that British people, like, there was never going to be love anyway. And he gets swept up. So it's Lisa Kudrow leads like this team of, I think it's right there on the title of it, Time Bandits. They're basically pirates who are traveling through space and time to get a treasure. And like, It's fine. It's got the adventure. It's got the, special effects. I think it's got a bit of gee whiz. Like, isn't this kind of fun? But I'll be honest, I've never really taken to those British stories where a young child is emotionally just abandoned by a family that he lives with, whether that's his actual family or an adopted family, or however these stories usually end up sort of playing out. It's pretty common in British fiction, and it's just always seemed mean and cruel to me in a way that I can never really quite connect with.
Okay, well, that's interesting, because for me, the focus of the original film and the...
Also, sorry, Simon, you know what this film needed more of? What? Midgets. I believe the movie had midgets in, tropes.
Yes, they did. Here. It's not a term we really sort of use too much anymore, Dan, but I do take your point.
Actors. We need more actor midgets.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, the point I want to make is that the film was very closely aligned to the Monty Python sense of humor, and so much of the humor that came out of the original film was of that Terry Gilliam, Monty Python sort of eccentricity. And in that regard, I think that sort of comes through in what Taika Waititi does. I don't think he fully abandons it. I think he makes it his own. And I thought it a fairly sort of engaging blend of what Waititi does best and what we liked most about the Monty Python influence on the first film. You're right; it does miss the oddball casting of the little people, which highlighted the first film. But having said that, I thought Lisa Kudrow was really funny in this, and it's a bit of left field casting to have her in there in a show like this. But she's very, very good. And the cast that she's surrounded by also is good as well. So I thought this actually came pretty close to what the original did, and in that regard, I was pleasantly surprised by it. Do I go back and watch however many episodes there are? Maybe. It only runs it's only a 25-minute episode, so I might go back and check things out, because I remember fondly the traveling through time that made the first one so much fun. So yeah, I might check it out.
The first episode was 40 minutes, and I never got past that one. Just dropped back to 20-minute episodes after that.
Okay.
I'm asking the question. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was. It may have been. So, yes. Okay. No, it does drop back to a 25-minute or 20-minute episode after that.
Yeah. So, again, I just want to iterate, I think it's probably great for kids. I think that if you're a youngster, you'll probably get into this way more than a big grown-up like me who was, just a bit bored by it all.
Why don't, just to put a line through this, why don't you ask me what I've been watching?
Well, because it's already mid-segment. What have you been watching? Just tell me.
All right, okay. So I had a bit of a roll lately on sort of star bios, like documentaries about famous stars. And I watched 3 this week that varied in quality quite remarkably and quite surprisingly from my point of view. On Netflix, there is a documentary called Remembering Gene Wilder. This takes a look at the career path of the actor, comedian, his relationship with Richard Pryor, his rise to fame through Bonnie and Clyde and Willy Wonka and Young Frankenstein. Unfortunately, this is very artless in the way it tells his story. It really does feel like a Wikipedia page. It uses Gene Wilder's own voice, which I'm assuming, I didn't read the credits, I probably should have, but I'm assuming was taken from one of his audio books. And it really just plops footage and film and photos down behind his voice. And it takes on a very hagiographic, I guess is the term to use. sort of version of his life. And you have Mel Brooks in there, and you have Carl Reiner and a few other people. But I found this one really disappointing, despite really loving Gene Wilder. The next one I watched is called Faye, which is the story of Faye Dunaway. She's front and center of her own documentary. It recounts her life. It recounts the personal hardship she went through with a couple of husbands. Her son is right by her. Her adult son is right by her through telling all of these stories. Plus, she sort of recounts the great film moments and the clashes with some of the big personalities she had in Hollywood and why it sort of both helped and hindered her career. This is a good documentary. It's not a great documentary, but if you're a fan of that 70s era filmmaking, then this is worth having a look at. It's called Faye. The one that I absolutely love, nobody really knows who Alan J. Pakula is, only the real hardcore film buffs. He's a filmmaker whose work really defined probably more than anyone, that sort of conspiracy theory cinema, American cinema of the 70s. He did All the President's Men. He did The Parallax View. His producing career goes all the way back. The first movie he produced was To Kill a Mockingbird with director Robert Mulligan. And then Alan J. Pakula just made these astounding films like Sophie's Choice all the way through to his shocking accidental death, which all his stars reflect upon in this documentary. The Meryl Streeps, the Harrison Fords, who was in Devil's Own and Presumed Innocent. He did the original Presumed Innocent, which is doing big bucks on the remake is doing well on Apple at the moment. Alan J. Pakula, Going for Truth, is a documentary that all film buffs should see, and which is just a wonderful piece of filmmaking.
Jesus, I just read how he died. Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if you want to give it up on the podcast, but the way that people like Julia...
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. The way that people like Julia Roberts and Brian Dennehy recount when they learnt of his death is just heartbreaking in this documentary.
Yeah. Anyway, for
what else
something
have
a
you
little bit
been
more...
watching? I think there's one other thing that you've been watching that we should hear about.
Look, I went and saw the movie Twisters. I had a great time with it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was good.
Yeah. Okay. That's all it had to be. That was fine.
Yeah. But ultimately, what do you say about the movie? Like, they get out there, they chase some twisters. Look, there was maybe sort of one element I thought was maybe just a bit sort of, I wouldn't call it hacky, but just a bit convenient, which is halfway through the movie, she realizes that the YouTube guys are actually the good guys and the scientists that she's working with are probably not necessarily doing the right thing. And she just kind of makes this immediate sort of realization, like 3 seconds later, she's changed allegiances and she's headed off. And it was just too convenient.
It was the only plot in the film. Let's face it, there wasn't a whole lot else. It was sort of the only place the film could go.
It delivered exactly what I was after from it. Like, it's fine. I wish it was a bit funnier, but it's a minor quibble.
Yeah.
Perfectly
entertaining. We mentioned that in our review that it is a humorless film, which is a shame.
Yeah, I mean, most films are humorless. But look, I'll take a Twisters over having to sit through Time Bandits again any day of the week. Folks, this has been what else we've been watching. We're going to move on to Australia's favourite 15 minutes time period. It's where we play our House of Games.